I'm David Wilcock, and this is Wisdom Teachings. Is there a pure information template of quantum energetic life that exists before physical matter ever occurs? If we were to call this type of thing a supergene, could these supergenes actually be sculpting the very nature of reality as we know it? Is there a relationship between quantum energetic life and our thoughts and the words that we speak? Is this, again, the secret we see in the Hebrew alphabet, where there is an underlying geometric code unifying the shapes of all the letters? And could this indicate that our DNA is somehow directly related to the patterns of human speech, perhaps on a fractal level? Are there scientists who have actually discovered how this science can be applied to human healing? And did they even get to the point of being able to regrow the teeth in a human mouth where no teeth existed? These are some of the exciting questions that we're going to cover in this episode. What we're going to go through in this episode is groundbreaking material because it fundamentally redefines what it means to be a human being. How did you get here? Where did you arise from? What is the true nature of your body and your identity? Will you end when your body dies, or is there something much more? We've talked at great length about the existence of the soul, about the omnipresence of energetic components of biological life in all aspects of science. The whole universe can now be re-envisioned as a biological homeostatic organism, and thus all galaxies and stars, planets, and beings on those planets are merely like organs in some greater totality. And when we go back to what we saw in previous episodes with the amplituhedron, this original geometric pattern that is the seed of the entire universe at the quantum level, therein lies our key. It is a geometric universe in which we can fundamentally redefine all different branches of science as being manifestations of harmonics and vibration, which happens to take the form of geometry. In the previous episode, we were talking about the further extenuations of Nobel Prize-winning biologist Dr. Luc Montagnier's research regarding not just the manifestation of DNA in water, which involves alchemy, transmutation, hydrogen and oxygen turning into complex proteins and amino acids. No, he actually took it beyond that and showed, as we said, the manifestation of bacteria and DNA fragments where they did not exist in cells. So as we read in a paper last year, Montagnier described how he discovered the apparent ability of DNA fragments and entire bacteria both to produce weak electromagnetic fields and to regenerate themselves in previously uninfected cells. And then, of course, this ties in with the work of Dr. Vlael Khaznachiev, who discovered the same thing, and it was picked up by Dr. Tom Bearden. You remember we saw two petri dishes, one that has an infected specimen, one that has regular healthy cells, but if you have a quartz pane in between them, so ultraviolet light can pass, then the infection passes to the healthy cells with no actual contact with infected material. It's only with glass that the infection is blocked. So we talked about the idea that energetic weaponry could be used against us to remotely influence our bodies to develop diseases even without any normal pathogenic path. And that's very disturbing. And I talked a little bit about the protocols to block against that, and I want to go into a little more detail now, because this does all come back to the law of karma. The law of karma is enforced by beings like the Anshar that Corey has been talking to in our show Cosmic Disclosure here, and I do believe they are very real. I've been having ongoing dream contacts with them myself, and I do not believe that Corey is making any of this up. So these beings, I've had a lot of experience with them over the years. I've had them in dreams, and it's clear that what happens to us is not random. Almost anything of great significance in our lives, or even sometimes middle-of-the-road significance, is actually being modified. Our experiences are not random. They are being steered and modified and sculpted by what we do and what we think. And there are higher beings whose job, as Corey has seen, they're sitting in these chairs and they're telepathically interfacing with us, and they're also making things happen. They're interfacing with others, they're nudging them to be at a certain place at a certain time, and they're allowing or blocking various things from happening. So this means that even if this technology exists to remotely transfer disease, it's not going to happen unless you have authorized yourself to get sick. It's another way in which karma can catch up with us even faster in today's age, given the fact that this technology is widespread. And so is it possible that microwave beaming antennas similar to High Altitude Auroral Research Project, or HAARP, which is apparently land-based and satellite-based, could those have pathogenic bacterial signals in them as well? It's quite possible. But again, you are not a victim. You are not susceptible to this unless you authorize it to happen. And so you can rest assured that your protection is secure as long as you are being a good person and doing your best to show forgiveness to others, compassion to others, and to yourself, being a person who does not engage in consciously unloving acts. It's very, very easy to go down the negative path, and it's a lot more difficult to really practice that compassionate approach, an open heart, a forgiveness that happens even when you would have a justifiable reason to really blow your stack at somebody. Remember the quote of the Buddha, "A single moment of anger can undo a lifetime of good works." And I believe that is very profound. So it's so easy for some of us to have a meltdown, have a tantrum, fire off a very angry word or an angry phrase or even just a look, and feel that we are justified and that we deserve to have that moment. But it really doesn't add up when you look at what could happen, because allowing yourself to go to an angry place could allow those frequencies to get in, could allow that to affect your biological health. So that's where we started with this, and then we took it into the realm of Dr. Peter Garyaev, and I want to get into him now on a deeper level. So Dr. Peter Garyaev, as we see here with his LGN 303 laser, a very enigmatic technology that allows him to beam genetic information from one cell to another. And actually what's happening is there's transverse waves in that laser beam. So instead of all the photons going in one direction, there's sort of an interference pattern where you get that crossing effect. And as is the case with so many of these source field technologies, it's the 90-degree angle, it's the orthogonal intersection. That 9-degree angle of energetic and electromagnetic fields is where all the juice starts to happen. All of the cool effects that we wouldn't expect start to take place. So Garyaev is a scientist who has made many stunning breakthroughs. And as I said before, you can go to his website, eng.wavegenetic.ru, and read from these papers that we've been describing. So very briefly, I'm going to read from what we started with last time because it's going to pick up beautifully where we left off. And he's saying the dominant viewpoint in genetics and biology is that it's a purely material structure. There's no spiritual or hidden energy involved. And all of the genetic aspects of DNA are hidden in 2% of its biological system, including RNA replication and the coding of an organism, and that would include the brain, as we were saying. The 98% left over is considered to be junk DNA, which they don't think has any genetic purpose at all. But in his view, that 98% is the key intellectual structure of all the cells of the organism, including the brain. So this now gets into the idea that the brain is actually an energetic template. It begins as energy. And we were talking in previous episodes about how various scientists are kind of getting dragged kicking and screaming to see that. We're seeing DNA type of structures appearing just in dust when you create a simulation of plasma and dust in a computer. We're seeing DNA molecules attracted to each other over long distances as if they have some greater energy field that's moving through them. And it doesn't seem that it could be anything in the conventional electromagnetic sense. And now we have Garyaev, who's doing practical experiments that are showing this same phenomenon in action and coming up with the theoretical model to explain it. And that's where he gets the idea of wave genetics, quantum energetic life occurring before any matter is there. The ideal component, which he calls the super-gene continuum, ensures development and life of humans, animals, and plants, and also their programmable natural death. So here he's saying that this quantum energetic life, this super-gene continuum, is an information template that's greater than matter. It's before matter, it's the precursor to matter, and yet this is controlling how all life evolves. Well, now that NASA's telling us 40 billion Earth-like planets just in the Milky Way galaxy alone, wow. If life is energetic, then that totally changes what we think that we're alone in the universe. It's very, very unlikely, almost impossible. And all of our insiders are telling us that they're interacting with human-looking extraterrestrials in many cases, or at least hominid. When we've talked to Emery Smith, remember, he has autopsied some 3,000 different species of extraterrestrial life, which all apparently is coming in from the secret space program and the trade that they're doing with various extraterrestrial groups. And he was just one guy working at one base where there were dozens and dozens of people doing this at the same time on many floors. And so the idea that we are alone in the universe is a lie perpetrated by this group within the military-industrial complex that has already encountered that greater galactic family, and it's become the most embarrassing secret on Earth. We are so kept in the dark. We are being lied to unimaginably. And we're not just being lied to about the fact that we are surrounded by ETs that haven't yet chosen to do a big dramatic landing on the White House lawn. We're also being lied to about science. There's very fundamental findings that upturn everything we think we know. And you have to remember the scope of this cabal, this negative group that has been pulling the strings in the world, the scope of how much they have manipulated our society, the scope of how much they have infected the way you think, cannot be undermined. They have literally modified the entire scientific discourse down a path that they want to be a certain way. It's akin to gardening and pruning, where you have a bush that has flowering buds on it, and they're going to prune off the buds that are not in the way they want. They're going to manicure the whole discussion. So what I feel like I'm doing here is I don't have to make these discoveries. The discoveries are already made. We just need to have this massive jigsaw puzzle and start identifying the pieces and figure out how they fit together, because the work has been done. And Gary Ive is one of the best. So let's read a little more from his thesis, his main paper that's on that website. And along with that, he says, it's important to conceive there is no sharp, insurmountable distinction between these genes and supergenes, meaning you can't separate life from its energetic component. His website, again, is called Wave Genetics, and so he is saying the wave is fundamentally interacting with the DNA at all times, and it's dynamically interacting with the DNA. If the DNA starts to have errors in its development, the wave can correct those errors. And so he deliberately created disease conditions, or in some cases beamed in waves where a disease condition already existed, and got dramatic healing effects. So that is where the rubber meets the road. He's not just making up a theory, he's proving that it's true by showing you how it works, using, in this case, laser light to capture those energetic waves. And there's a lot more to this that gets into fractals, so let's keep reading. Genes supply material replications in the form of RNA and proteins, whereas these energetic quantum supergenes are transforming both endogenous and exogenous fields, forming supergene signal wave structures. So this is where he's saying, okay, don't get caught up about, because genes, of course, are physical, right? They're physical things. Don't get caught up about supergenes being some physical thing. It's a wave. It's a supergene wave structure that's penetrating through matter. Furthermore, the genes may be components of holographic grids or frameworks of supergenes, and those holographic grids are supervising their field activity. So now he's getting into the science of holograms as well. And of course, holograms and fractals are very nicely interconnected. So this makes sense. Because the principles of a holographic plate, remember, is you can cut that plate into all kinds of small pieces, hit it with a laser, and instead of getting a fragment of the hologram, you get the whole hologram. It's just a little dimmer. So the holographic principle essentially says that it's the same thing at all different levels spread throughout the universe. You see the same pattern again and again. And that's what fractals do. You can zoom in on a fractal and you keep seeing the same shape repeating as you zoom in more and more. It's very curious. So he's saying that the quantum energetic life, the supergenes, behave this way. That the pattern of life is fractal and holographic throughout the whole universe. And there's some dynamic interaction with physical genes in the DNA itself. And again, remember, Garyaev has not seen that the DNA wraps around a dodecahedron. He doesn't have the information from Mark White about how the 4 nucleotides, A, C, T, and G, that make DNA could be the 4 corners of a tetrahedron, and you move that tetrahedron inside the dodec, which would be, again, your 20 amino acids, as we said in previous episodes, and by moving it around in different ways, you can build all the proteins we need for life. So that's kind of like the working model of how this can actually make life. But here he's laying out the blueprints, which is, yes, this starts as a holographic template of information. Well, again, if it is geometric, then the whole universe is that fractal of the original seed. It's like the whole universe is a tree that blossomed out of one seed, and that seed is the Merkaba, the star tetrahedron. So now with wave genetics, we're seeing how that hologram not only creates all matter, but it directly extends into supergenes, wave genetics, the templates that make life. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because Garyaev is about to pay off stuff that I was telling you in previous episodes regarding the power of human speech, because the vibrations that we speak do create sounds, and those sounds create geometry, and geometry, of course, is what underpins the genetic code as what he's calling supergenes. So look at this. Particular attention in the wave genome theory should be devoted to substantiating the unity of fractals that replicate on various scales in the sequence structures of DNA and in human speech. Wow. So he's making a direct analogy between the words, if you will, in DNA and the words that we speak, and saying the two are fundamentally interrelated, which is exactly what we've been saying. In 1990, Dr. Jeffrey Delro discovered 4 letters of the genetic alphabet: adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine, A, G, C, and T, in the DNA textbooks form fractal structures. Well, this is really interesting. So Jeffrey Delro, here he is. This is a picture of him. There's very few pictures of him I could find online. And this is another one where he's wearing a bicycle helmet in front of a very gorgeous mountain view. And I also was able to find this about him on ResearchGate, where it says that he is a Doctor of Philosophy, which is PhD, at the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center. So again, Dr. Jeffrey Delro's big discovery is showing that there are fractal patterns in how the 4 basic nucleotides assemble into DNA, and those patterns very nicely add up to the way that our speech works. So this is really strange. It takes it to a deeper level, right? The actual way that we make language and the